Hello and welcome to Oakville Matters. Thanks to your TV on Kojiko, we have a chance to connect with each other and talk about the things that matter to Oakville the most. Today, and I've forgotten which day of COVID-19, I'm joined by Councillor Janet Haslett-Thiel and Councillor Tom Adams. Janet, take a bow. Tom, take a bow. Janet represents the Southeast Oakville area, and Tom represents, can I call you the Northeast area of Oakville and get
Sure,
away
Rob,
with it?
that's appropriate.
Okay. And Tom has been on council forever and a day. I know he looks too young for that to be true, but he's been on council longer than I have.
It's only the light.
17, 18 years, something like that.
Well, since 2003, you can do the math.
Yeah, so there you go. And Janet, who has joined us more recently, are you have you broken past your second year now, or?
Not at my second year, and I'm not counting the days anymore. I just count, about a year and a half in.
A year and a half in, but already a major presence. So Southeast Oakville has not been denied a voice in any way. Let's play a round of what's new. I understand that we might have today's numbers. Do we in fact have today's numbers? I'm looking to Joey, who doesn't like to be recognized. Yes, we have today's numbers, and we continue to be pretty good on the numbers. This morning, the 4 mayors of Halton and the chair of Halton, Gary Carr, and Burlington Mayor Marianne Mead Ward, Milton Mayor Gord Krantz, and Halton Hills Mayor Rick Burnett and I, we sent a letter to the Premier saying, excuse us, but the criteria you published yesterday for what you have to meet to go to phase 2, we meet those criteria. So you must have made a mistake in leaving us out of your phase 2 reopening. Would you please take a look at that? And
well, that's a great question there that you've just raised, Rob. And maybe the reason that they've done that is we've got neighbors who aren't so great in terms of the COVID numbers. And
well,
that's why.
There is, yeah. How would you describe what's going on in Brampton and Mississauga, Tom?
Well, Peel and Toronto specifically have had really high numbers by comparison to the rest of Ontario. And specifically, Toronto has what's called the reproduction number, which is above 1 and continues to be above 1, which is to say their infection numbers are going up, not down, and that's really problematic. And because we live in a GTA region that has lots of people moving around, we've got residents who are going into Toronto and into Peel and vice versa, and so we do have this risk of, I'll call it cross-contamination or cross-infection happening. And that's probably why the province has said we're going to keep Halton in phase 1 for the moment, or stage 1. On the other side of us, we've got Hamilton and we've got Niagara. Both of them also have higher infection numbers than we have in Halton. And so while Halton itself has done really well with respect to the reproduction number being just below 1, which is to say that each case creates just under one new case, and over time, if you kept that going, you could eventually drive it down to nothing. But we're surrounded on both sides with communities that have higher numbers, and in some of their cases, their reproduction numbers are above 1, which means that you get an expanding number of cases, not a reducing number of cases. And so if I were the province, I'd be looking at that and being worried that you've got one community in the middle that's getting a gold star, so to speak, Halton, in terms of its management of the issue, but we're surrounded by others who are not. And so if you've got people going across, that's a problem.
Yeah. Janet?
I think Tom described that incredibly well. People need to understand this factor of 1. And it's really hard to be patient when we're going through all this. It's been a long haul, we all know that. And I think we were all getting excited that we would be opening up a bit more this coming week. And once again, we just have to bear the test of time and keep demonstrating that we can do the right thing, and make sure that if we're traveling, we're alert to what our neighbors' conditions are, because none of us want to spend the rest of the summer sitting waiting for this to pass on or die out, if you will.
Yeah.
But there's good news.
I will say that we were cross about the fact that the Premier said that the decision had been made by the local medical officer of health, and our medical officer of health, we learned this morning, had not recommended that we be left out of the reopening. And then this morning, a mayor to the east of us falsely claimed that the mayors in Halton had been consulted and agreed, and we had not been consulted. And
Oh boy.
so, we've got all kinds of businesses in town who've been very good, and all kinds of residents who've been very good. And we didn't think it was, we're not anticipating it to be very fun to be blamed by them for being left out of the reopening when everybody's been so good. So we sent a letter mostly to establish that, if we accept that the Premier has the authority to make the decision, we just don't like him and others falsely blaming us for the decision. If you make a decision, you should own your decision.
I'd agree with that, Rob. And what I would say, though, is didn't he commit that next Monday there may be more news, and we might be in that we might get a little bit of a relief next week?
He promised it on this coming Monday. So what's happening is, outside of the GTA and Niagara and Waterloo and Hamilton and the Windsor area, everybody else is reopening or going to phase 2 of reopening on this coming Friday.
Right.
And on Monday, he'll reevaluate the rest of us with a possibility of any who meet the criteria being able to go to phase 2 on Friday the 19th. So since we meet the criteria, and he said if any of the ones who are being held back met the criteria next Monday, we would go ahead on Friday the 19th. I think we've got a strong reason to expect that that'll be our day. And of course, when you're dealing with the province, you have to just wait and see. It's amusing and heartwarming the degree to which a lot of Oakville residents think that Janet and Tom and I and the rest of council have the ability to say, to overrule the province. But in fact, the province, as the kids would say, the province is the boss of us, as we keep finding out, right? So, Janet, what else would you like to tell your residents?
So in the things that are happening in our ward and issues coming forward, speeding's a big one. So I think people being home and being around, working on their properties, taking those long walks, they're noticing a fair amount of speeding on the roads, or a feeling of speeding, because, it needs to be, assessed by a traffic engineer. So speeding is a concern, and some of the residents associations in our ward want to get together and assess, is there anything we can do to encourage, enforce, make sure people really take their responsibility to drive safely on the residential neighborhoods seriously. It is, they're worried about kids on their bikes. They're worried, even though young children can ride on the sidewalk, some are riding on the road. Some of the teenagers that are out there's a concern about safety as it relates to speeding. So that's top of mind. The other big one is we're pleased that Gairloch the restoration has been done beautifully. People have been able to get out for a walk in one of our landmark parks, and people are getting out to Lakeside to enjoy the outdoors. We would ask that people remember, the litter campaigns we used to have many, many years ago. Don't leave garbage piling up around the garbage pails thinking, oh, someone will be there in the next 30 minutes to empty it. That's just not a reality that we live in right now. And so let's keep our parks beautiful, and it's going to take all of us together. That's on lots of emails and people's minds about what can we do to make the parks more beautiful. Well, we can all work together to keep the parks beautiful. And
Yeah, take your garbage home. Take your garbage home with you.
Yeah, like, I mean, take a bag with you and just put it in your trunk and put it in the Friday waste day.
You should tell your residents how in Tom's ward nobody litters and they don't have that problem.
That's true, Tom. Tom, do you have the magic formula? Because we want it.
Oh no, we got overflowing garbage cans all over the north. I tell you, it's one of the common complaints that we get are the park garbage cans being overflowing and needing to be emptied and that kind of thing. That's probably some of the number one issues that come in as complaints and throughout the north, I think.
So there you go. Nobody takes his garbage home with them.
So there you are.
And I should call out that our park staff, they're working really hard. There's some students coming back, I think the week of June 15th, that'll start to help. But again, we can all do our part and just do the obvious. The pail's full. There's no room for more. Take it home.
Like God gave you eyes for a reason. Use them.
You said that, Mayor Burton. I didn't say that. The other big thing is the library. The library's big news. Lots of people excited about library takeout starting today, as it is. 3 locations. I'm pleased to sit on the library board, and the library team has worked hard to come up with this new version called Library Takeout, which allows a resident to put a book on hold and book a time that then they can come and pick that up at Iroquois Ridge, Glen Abbey, and Woodside. And at the same time, there's drop off at those 3 locations. I think the stats are there were something like 60,000 books out and in circulation at the time we went into COVID. There's 1,000 books that were on hold even pre-COVID. So there's lots of, work to be done to get those holds into people's hands so they have new reading to do while we work our way through COVID. And there's fresh materials that are going to get returned, and they need to go into quarantine, the materials, for a period and then get recirculated. So that's all wonderful news for our library users. We are a bit in Ward 3 anxious to hear what the strategy will be to try and provide some type of library takeout at the central branch, but it's complicated. It is an older building where the social distancing, the physical distancing with the staff and those that are picking up their holds is hard to do in the back entry to New Central. And so we have the assurance of the CEO and her team that they're working on, is there an alternative? And at some point, can we get Central Branch able to do library takeout? So those are some of the big news items. And the last one of concern is, and it's important, is that there's a site plan application at the corner of Cornwall and Ford. It is to take an old warehouse and it will be an Amazon warehouse. And there's some concerns about the traffic that may be created and potential noise. The town staff are working through the site plan application. It is a site plan application. It is not a land use application, but they're trying to help the residents understand that they're analyzing the applicant's requests to try and make sure that they're going to be a good neighbor. And they're also trying to work through a ministerial zoning order that is on the lands and is the request has been to remove it from the applicant. Lots of residents would not accept that building should be allowed to expand in the future. And so Councillor Giddings and I have been encouraging the town staff and others to write their letters to the province. As you said, we're the creature of the province, to say, don't allow them to remove the language that restricts expansion, because we expect that we'll have a warehouse, but we don't want it to be bigger than it currently is in the future. And that's the big news of what's going on in the ward right now.
So you have two issues, if I heard you right. One is they're entitled to operate a warehouse in the given warehouse, and they have some kind of site plan application, which is usually concerns with where the parking is, where the driveway is, where the sidewalks are, those kinds of things, and which way the lights point. And then and then on top of that, there's another matter called a ministerial zoning order that sits on the land and works to prevent the building from being enlarged. Is that the issue?
So the ministerial zoning order was called the Parkway Belt. It makes it sound like it's protecting parkland, but it's not. It was protecting sort of industrial, electrical wires, et cetera, that could go through primarily. But it also had a restriction on it that said you can't expand on this land. If the province agrees to, in the ministerial zoning order, to say, yes, you can build the parking lot in this one area, which is really at the crux of the matter. They want to expand the parking lot. You can build this parking lot, but you can't expand your building. For the applicants asking for the ability to have future expansion. And our view is you don't need future expansion. You need the parking lot. We understand you need the parking lot, but you don't need to be able to make your warehouse bigger. You can run a successful business without that additional latitude that right now the ministerial zoning order stops them from taking.
I see. So you're hoping that your member of provincial parliament, Stephen Crawford, has lots and lots of influence with the Minister of Municipal Affairs, who is the minister referred to in a zoning order. Is that right?
I'm hopeful for that. I'm hopeful that our town staff, in their ongoing dialogue with the ministry, can help them understand there's no need to remove the entire ministerial zoning order. And then obviously we're looking on the separate issue for town staff before they approve the site plan, because site plan is approved by the director of planning. Before they would go to approve it, that they've given us assurances on traffic and safety, because there are serious safety questions about how the tractor trailers are going to quay and come in and out of that site. So yes, it's a complicated matter.
So as I understand it, we require people to queue on their property rather than on the road. So I hope that'll obtain. But anyway, I will just say, after 14 years of site plan work, it's important to understand that site plan doesn't prevent things, it only regulates things. So
and hopefully it can mitigate. I mean, if
Yeah.
it can mitigate, I mean, that's the best we can do. It's zoned as an E2. It's been a warehouse for many years. So there's limits to what we can do. I think the residents, most of them starting to understand that. But if we can mitigate and make sure that there's proper turning lanes and that they operate in a way that doesn't cause safety concerns on the roadways, that is the goal.
Yep, I understand. It's a very sensitive neighborhood. In fact, residential areas are called sensitive land uses because when they hear noises from industrial or commercial activities, they're very sensitive to them. So, Tom, what do you want to tell your neighbors and residents?
Well, if you're talking about sensitive neighbors and noise, you should probably know that Halton Regional Police has been out catching noisemakers on the roadways in Oakville over the last couple of days. They've been catching them on Trafalgar Road and Upper Middle and Brawny, so all over town. They've been doing a little bit of enforcement around the issue of modified vehicles with mufflers that have been removed and, what we call noisemakers. And so for those
I know those people must be very surprised, because for years and years, the police wouldn't do that. And so it's pretty cool that they're willing to go out there, isn't it? Unless you're one of those noisemakers, probably not.
Unless you're one of those noisemakers. Well, you know that Oakville has a rule around motorcycle noise, and so the same kind of thing applies to all vehicles. You have to have a muffler, and they have been picking them up in not only Oakville but in Burlington as well. And so amazingly, one of our officers regularly tweets out his catches on the roadway, and I note that he's got just an amazing number of, first of all, followers, but the number of people who like his tweets about having caught noisemakers is just amazing. I've never seen that kind of response to those tweets. Just an amazing number of responses. So that's one thing. The other thing that we were talking about parks and open space earlier. The other common question that we're getting these days is how come the grass isn't being cut as often? And we are cutting grass, but we're cutting it a little bit less often than we normally would because we don't have all of our summer students on yet.
We're about to see a big change there, though.
That's right. So June 15th, I understand we're going to have a number of our summer students coming on board. And once they're out, I think it'll help a lot in terms of getting our parks and open space trimmed up and looking a little bit more like normal.
We've always had a higher standard of grass cutting, and I'll call it general beautification and maintenance of the town than other municipalities. And so it's been very regretful for the last 2-3 months as we weren't able to keep up to our usual fastidious level of care. So so how is school going for your kids, Tom?
Well, they're all looking forward to the end of their classes now. They're looking out to the last couple of weeks of online classes, and I know that two of my 3 kids are going to be entertained in July by doing summer classes. They're both going to be picking up extra credits in grade 9 classes and in a grade 12 class. So they're reaching ahead in terms of the credits. So I know that schools are now talking about the programs that are going to be made available for kids to get extra credits or to reach back and make sure that they're far enough along in terms of the work that they've been doing and ready to take on the next year of learning in September. So whichever school board you might be part of, parents ought to be taking a look at what the offerings are going to be over the summer to help their kids keep learning and keep up with the things that they need to know for the next year.
So are there, I mean, you must know a lot of, I mean, you know, your kids are in school, all 3 of them. They all have friends, their friends have parents. You must be in touch. Are you in the school age crowd? Are you happy with online learning? Are you longing for the classroom? What's the verdict on this shift?
I think that most parents recognize that you know, everyone's trying to do the best they can, but there's, I think, a lot of hit and miss in terms of each school and their ability to convert into online learning. Some have done an okay job in terms of being ready for it. There are some schools, for example, that were set up technically to be able to go to an online format fairly quickly, others that were not. And so there's I think a gap there in terms of which schools were ready and which ones were not. And it was hit and miss in terms of the teachers being ready to convert their own materials into an online format. I would say there's a long way to go before it's really truly ready. And most, I think, would like to see some eventually to be able to return to a classroom format, because that's truly going to be the way that you engage kids and get the best learning. The online format is really a second best.
I watched a video interview this morning with a professor at the University of California at Berkeley, who's a public health professor, and he was saying that, and so what his research was they compared the social measures to control the virus around the world for effectiveness. And the keep your distance one proves out, no matter how you test it, to have been really effective. And masks turn out to be effective. The keep your distance one is by far and away the best. And the but closing schools, he said, you can't find any evidence that it helped or hurt. It didn't make it better. It didn't make it worse. You know, people that left them open, people that closed them.
Yeah.
And you know, the fear that the children would spread it had not been borne out in his research. And so maybe there'll be, maybe over the summer, over the next 6 months, maybe that kind of research will start to inform the province's decisions, we can hope. But I want to leave you with this one thing he said that was really kind of brought me to a stop for a second. He said, when you look at the disease rates and the death rates, it's really clear that an unbelievable number of lives have been saved by what we did. And that it's actually unheard of in the history of the planet for people to come together like this and save so many lives. Now, I hear from the disgruntled few who are actually expressing fairly ugly thoughts about the lives weren't worth saving, but I find that that's a very rare and unusual and cruel way to look at this. The expert's remark really came home to me. He said, you know, all you have to do is compare the death rate in Canada and Sweden. Theirs is twice ours. If we had Sweden's death rate, twice as many people would be dead. No, wait, 3 times as many people would be dead in Canada because we're 3.5 times their size. So
yeah, and if you look at our net, we're just about 8,000 people that have died formally in terms of the caseload in Canada. Imagine if that was 24,000.
Or 30, it'd probably be something like 30,000 people. So so we've saved a lot of lives for our effort, and we can at least, I think we can comfort ourselves with A, that, and B, that the light is not at the end of a distant tunnel. We can actually, we've already been through phase 1 opening. We're on the verge of phase 2, whether the Premier reconsiders for us right away or whether we get there because we already qualify next week. There is definitely hope ahead. And I hope everybody keeps well and stays safe. I thank you two for joining us. I thank you for joining us and watching us and listening to us. And send questions that you want answered to mayor@oakville.ca, and we'll see you next time.